Hey, Dr. Darko, where do you go to get your life and disability insurance?
I went to Step for Life Insurance. They helped me save over 30% compared to my previous policy.
Wow, I'm paying an arm and a leg for my life and disability insurance. What's that company called again?
Step for Life Insurance. Check them out at stepforlifeinsurance.com and tell them Dr. Darko sent you.
Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry, you're getting real life insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
Hey docs, are you looking to learn how to become a physician leader? Then Physician CEO is for you. Physician CEO is an accelerated business immersion program designed for physicians and developed by MBA faculty from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. So learn more at www.physician-ceo.com/DOTB. What's up and what's good, everyone? Thank you for joining me on this episode. My name is Dr. Nee. I am the host of this show, The Doc Outside the Box, and I'm really excited that I have an old guest coming on the show. I have Dr. Carrie Reynolds. She is the host of the Hippocratic Hustle podcast, and she was actually a guest on episode 59. And we didn't do an interview. We actually did more of a strategy session where we talked about ways in which she can maximize this transition from being a W-2 employee to really embracing that 1099 locums life. I definitely highly recommend that you go ahead and take a listen to that one. For those who are not familiar with Dr. Carrie, she is a pediatric gastroenterologist as well as an entrepreneur. Initially, she started off in private practice and quickly became bored, simply going to work every day. And now she has really embraced being fulfilled in her life when she is balancing both her medical profession with her entrepreneurial pursuits. And knowing that she couldn't be alone in these interests, she went ahead and started the Hippocratic Hustle podcast, which now boasts over 100,000 downloads. You all should be listening to this podcast. It's an excellent podcast. Now, Dr. Carrie, she lives in Denver, Colorado with her husband, who's also a surgeon, as well as their 8-year-old daughter. And she is living life on her own terms. She is working towards financial independence. And she's also chiseling away at their combined $450,000 of student loan debt balance. Dr. Carrie, fist up to you. Keep doing what you're doing. I've definitely been there. Now, on this episode, we have her on the show to really talk about her world, get a glimpse into her world of podcasting and how it has really changed her life. We're going to hear about why she started the podcast, what's it like starting a podcast with all the highs, as well as some of the lows of doing a podcast, the next step, where does she see the podcast going, as well as what she's learned from her guests. This is going to be one that you don't want to miss. Please also make sure you're sharing this episode with others. And remember, we talk about it in the show, but if you are interested in listening to other podcasts that are hosted by other docs, please check out the Physician Podcasted directory on drneedarko.com. Go under podcasts and check under podcast listening. There you will find a whole bunch of different podcasts that are listed under so many different topics, from personal finance to business to whatever you think you may want to be interested in it. A doctor is hosting that podcast. So make sure you go ahead and check that out. And without further ado, I present Dr. Carrie Reynolds with the Hippocratic Hustle podcast. Dr. Carrie Reynolds from the Hippocratic Hustle podcast. Welcome back. You're a second time victim, I guess, of the show.
Victim, that's hilarious.
That's how I call them, I guess. They're all victims. It's good to have you back. The first time we had you on, we basically did a strategy session on your life as a locums. I thought that was really fun. That was actually one of my highest downloaded episodes. People wrote in.
Really?
Because people wanted to know what your life was like and what it was like to go from being an employed doc and becoming an independent contractor and some of the things that you needed to watch out for. People were really interested about that, and people liked that. And obviously your personality, people really gravitate to that. So
thanks.
That ended up being one of my best episodes. So I said, look, why don't you come on? Let's talk about not just your locums life, but also about this podcasting life and, you know, how you've been able to kind of get through it from starting to where you're at right now? Because I've seen big gains, not only in, your ability to handle an interview, but you got it going. So I said, let's get you on the show and hear more about your, the trials and tribulations of starting a podcast.
Yeah, so much fun. Oh my God, podcasting is a hoot. It's just a blast.
It is. It's what's in vogue right now. And the name of your podcast is called The Hippocratic Hustle. Why don't you take a moment, Dr. Carrie, and let the audience know more about your podcast?
Yeah, The Hippocratic Hustle. It's a podcast for women physicians. We help women physicians find freedom in life, work, and finances. So the main focus of the podcast is interviewing women physicians who are doing interesting things in and outside of medicine. So definitely have a range of really interesting people on the show as far as, if they started a nonprofit or if they started a company or if they're making a product. It's like there's so many stories out there that need to be told. And a lot of people out there who are wondering, gosh, how did they start that Scrubs company? How did they write that book? And so I give these ladies a chance to come on and talk about how they went through the steps to do it.
I love it. I love it. And that kind of is a similar, just motivation, similar mission with my podcast, kind of very similar. What was the rationale? Why did you decide to start your podcast? I want to hear all about that.
Well, I think the thing that really prompted me to do it was, there's a lot of Facebook groups that are focused on physicians and especially women physicians that I was really active in. And anywhere you go there, someone might start saying, oh, I do this. I wrote this book. And then people are like, oh, how did you do that? And then it's just so hard to type out the steps of what you did on a Facebook post. Yeah, exactly. And then plus it's going to be lost and,
translation.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's just lost. No one can find it again. So I saw lots of women trying to share what they were doing. And it just was really hard to communicate that way. One of the posts I saw, a woman had just started her own clinic. She went into private practice, started her own clinic, left this group practice that she was in. And she was trying to type exactly how she started a whole private practice in a Facebook post. And it was to answer somebody's question. And it was just there were so many typing errors and run-on sentences. And I could tell she just had so many ideas that she wanted to share, but she couldn't get them out in that format. So that really, I think her post was oh my gosh, I need to have, her and then all these other people who couldn't, express themselves like they might want to on a show where they can talk about it.
Why didn't you decide to because you could do YouTube, you can do live streaming. What attracted you to the podcast route?
Yeah, I'm definitely a huge fan of podcasts. I started listening to podcasts back in about 2004. And that was really...
wow, you're an early adopter.
Oh, so early.
Podcasting just started 2003, pretty much.
I listened to Adam Curry's show. And there was another show, and I'm not going to remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was a husband and wife team where they would just sit there and banter. This was in 2004 when no one knew what podcasting was. The rest of the shows I listened to were like Mac, Apple, nerd podcasts. There was a lot of tech podcasts out back then.
You're a techie.
Yeah, I'm kind of a techie.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I'm an Apple fangirl.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah.
PC, Android, all the way.
Heaven, since forever. But yeah, so podcasts started way back when. And I remember those early podcasts. And just one of the things I remember is there was a tech podcast. And I'm still trying to rack my brain, trying to remember what show this was. They asked for questions and I actually wrote in and they answered my question on the podcast, which I was just like, what?
You felt like a superstar.
Do you know what the question was? This is so dorky.
Let's go ahead. What's the question?
How do you pronounce VoIP? VoIP? Because it was back in the day.
Voice over internet protocol.
Yes, exactly. How do you pronounce it? Is it VoIP or is it VoIP? And so the question got them into this big debate about how to pronounce it. And to this day, I'm not sure what the right answer is. But
it is nerdy. I'm not going to lie. But hey,
pretty nerdy.
That is your 15 seconds of fame. Own it. Claim it. You know what I'm saying? I'm a big tech guy myself also. The reason why I love this whole thing that's going on right now with, podcasting and YouTubing. Look, I'm not going to front. I was a big nerd growing up, right? And you have all of these YouTubers who, back in the day when we were growing up in the 80s and early 90s, we would have been made fun of, right? That's true, right? But now you have people who are making thousands, millions of dollars of just making videos on YouTube and becoming these celebrities, or even podcasts, becoming these celebrities, and companies wanting to sponsor them. I think it's really cool right now that nerds and people who are techie or people who are just really passionate or whatever it may be, there's a place for them to really thrive. But I'm stealing your thunder. You go ahead. My bad.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's like anything you want to learn about, you can learn now, you can learn through a podcast.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, that's actually another reason why I started doing this show too, is that I couldn't find what I was looking for. There wasn't a show about it. You released slightly before me, but literally had not found your show before I started mine. So
Okay.
I guess that's a big problem in podcasting too, is podcast discovery. It's trying
Yes.
to find the podcast you want to hear. That's a big debate in the podcasting community, how to get our podcasts out there.
That's a great point. That leads to a good segue, not to do any self-promotion, but everybody, listeners, remember, if you're looking for a podcast, particularly podcasts that are hosted by physicians, Docs Outside the Box, we got a solution for you. Dr. Carrie's on this list. There is a podcast, a physician podcast directory. All you have to do is go to the website. I think it's under physician podcast directory. I can't remember right now.
Yeah, your website, right?
Just go to docsotb.com. There's a physician podcast directory. I think Dr. Carrie Reynolds is the first person who submitted. Thank you so much. And you just go there, and there's so many different podcasts that are categorized in so many different categories. So yours obviously is in finance, personal finance. But yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely a difficult thing, is trying to find out all the different podcasts. It's not like YouTube where all you have to do is go to YouTube and type something in and then boom, it comes up.
There's not a good search engine for podcasts. I know there's a lot of ideas of how people can fix that problem, but it's not there. And unfortunately, Apple Podcasts is the number one, way people listen to podcasts, and you can kind of search there, but its discovery tools are not great for finding what you want there either, unfortunately.
I agree. So you went ahead and you started this podcast. What was it like starting your podcast? Like, let's talk about the weeks before, up until when you launched, and even a little bit after that shortly. Like, what was that time like, that learning curve?
Yeah, I listened to a lot of podcasts about podcasting. There's a lot of those out there. So I found as many as I could find and listened to them on my commute. And my husband's a musician. So we have a number of microphones laying around our house. So I basically went down in the basement, dug out a microphone from his toolbox, essentially, plugged it in my computer, and realized it didn't work because it needs an amp.
So it's like XLR type of connection.
Yeah, exactly. So then I had to make a decision if I was going to, put some money into this, is that I needed either some sort of preamp to go into the computer so I could use his microphone, or I needed a USB microphone. So anyway, that was how it started. I just was trying to play around with microphones and see what worked. So I had to go out and buy one. So got my Blue Yeti.
What was it like when you put out your episode, or you put out your podcast and you get your first download, or you put it out there and there's no downloads? Talk to the audience about that. What was that like?
Oh my gosh, it is so funny. I released my podcast on my birthday. So it's really great. I can remember, the birth date of my podcast is the same as mine. But I put it out there, and, you just see a few downloads trickle, and you're like, oh my gosh, who just downloaded that? And you're like, oh wait, 3 of those were mine. Okay. That was me testing it on my phone, and then, my husband's phone, and
your mama.
Yeah, exactly. Then your mom texts you like, I heard your podcast. So then you're like, okay, that was mom. Yeah, it really is just a handful at the very beginning. But still, it's exciting to be able to see that it's going out into the ether, it's going out there.
Yeah, I'm still shocked that, I'm not going to lie, I'm still shocked that people listen, to our podcast, at least my podcast. Obviously, because I feel like, doctors were so busy. Doctors are just focused. A lot of doctors are just focused on hospital work, right? And anything outside, that realm is something that's just really unfamiliar. So the fact that they're listening to podcasts, and they're listening to my podcast, they're listening to your podcast, I just find it really fascinating that they decided to kind of consume, our products. And there's a pride that I have. Like, I mean, you should be proud. Like, I should be proud. Like, everybody should be proud that, like, we're creating something and people, are listening to it and gaining something for it. So
yeah, I mean, I initially started this where I wanted to get other people's stories out there. And not until I think I'd been doing it for a while did I realize, oh, I'm making something. I'm making art. I'm making a craft. This is my craft. So I think that helped me just put a little bit more, emphasis on the craft of it all. And it helped me feel a little bit better about what I was doing, that I wasn't just being a service, I guess, to other people to be able to get their stories out, but I was making something too, just like they were.
So, like, let's go 30,000 foot view. You created something from scratch. It's your voice, it's your editing, and, you put your specific brand on that. How do you feel about that now compared to now you're 2 years in now,
Yeah,
right?
almost, yeah.
I want to know what your mental is like right now compared to when you first started.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I do feel like I'm putting more of myself into it. I think, recently I put out some solo episodes, which are a totally different beast than interviewing.
A lot more difficult, right?
It's totally
A lot more
different.
difficult.
Totally difficult.
What's the most difficult part? Why is it difficult? Tell us.
Well, the vulnerability that you have, I think, with putting yourself out there in a non-conversational type of thing. And you have to imagine that there's literally someone sitting across the table from you that you're talking to. And that's a little bit hard to imagine. And then, putting the content together too is just something totally different as well. Because, when you and I'm sure that you do the same thing I do. It's like you do a little bit of research about your guests. You have some, vague idea of what you might want to ask them, but the conversation could go anywhere. It's an evolving beast as you're doing it, but you can't quite be that loosey-goosey with a solo episode, in my opinion. I'm sure there are people who go out there and just talk and it just comes out perfect, but I have to make notes and I have to plan out what I'm going to say, but I can't plan it too much because I don't want to read it. So it's kind of this delicate balance too.
What's the reception like? What are your downloads like? So let's be real. Like, what are your downloads like for your most recent episode where you talked about your life, your entry into locums compared to just normally interviewing a guest?
Well, I think honestly, what's interesting about my show is that I get very similar downloads from all of my shows. I think it's because people are working through the whole catalog. So people are listening to, more or less all of them. I have a lot of episodes now. So I know there's people who haven't listened to all of them, but I get emails all the time saying, I finally caught up with all of your episodes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you listened to every single episode. That's amazing because there's over 65 episodes now.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So I think the locums episodes have the similar downloads, but I have actually gotten more emails about them. That's what I've seen is a little bit different.
I think it makes sense because that's the same thing that happens to me. I feel like I get more engagement when I open myself up more and have a solo episode as opposed to having an episode with a guest, which they're both great. But I think there's something about the vulnerability that you put out there that people connect with.
Right. Yeah. So definitely I've gotten phone calls, emails, Facebook messages of people thanking me for my show, of people rethinking, what they want to do, being encouraged. And so that's pretty remarkable.
In terms of opportunities, talk about that. Like, have you gotten any opportunities from podcasting, any speaking gigs, anything that you probably would not have gotten, but for the fact that you podcast?
Yeah, definitely. Speaking gigs is something that I'm working on, organizing for the coming year. So I haven't had a chance to do that, but definitely I've gotten some requests. I have some things booked, which is super exciting because I really actually love speaking. Just another nerdy thing that I enjoy.
I put you on the spot, didn't I?
Yeah, it's okay. I'm trying to think if there's something a little bit more.
How about this? Let's pivot a little bit. What's next? What do you think is next for the Hippocratic Hustle podcast? Like, are you thinking maybe, something live or what about that?
Well, okay. In the short term, I have been thinking about this with podcasting. One of the problems with podcasting is it's not an immediate medium. So you can't talk to your audience with immediacy, if you know what I mean. It's like when I make a podcast, it takes a couple days at least for it to be edited and then to be published. And people can't talk back to me. Other than emails and things like that, it's not very quick. It's like snail mail. You're sending in a letter in the mail and you're waiting for someone to mail something back. So it's not the quickest form of communication. So in the short term, I am working on Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives so that I can have a little bit more immediacy with my communication with my audience.
Yeah, I actually saw yours where I think you were shopping. You were in your car recently, right?
I was actually signing up for a solo 401k. So I guess you could say I was shopping. I wasn't at the mall.
Yeah, I saw the pictures on Instagram. That is true. So congratulations to starting your own solo 401k. Let's take a step back though now. The reason why I want to bring that up is not only are you doing things from a podcasting standpoint that's outside the box, you decided to take things from a career standpoint outside the box. Earlier when we had you on the show, we had you talking about you leaving that employed W-2 life and becoming an independent contractor.
Oh
right?
my gosh. Yeah.
How's that been going?
Speaking of opportunities, actually, this is the biggest opportunity that I have undertaken due to what I've done with the podcast. Now, I probably would have just stayed complacent in my old job and just kept working there indefinitely if I hadn't have been so inspired by all of my guests. So, it really did inspire me to take a double look at what I was, doing with my professional career, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to practice medicine and all that stuff. So I think just having my guests on really challenged me a little bit personally, just like I know people are listening and they're always, coming up with ideas as they're listening to my episodes. I was as well. So one of my guests, Sheree Wiggins, she is a PM&R specialist from Idaho, and she's now become a really great friend of mine. Shout out to Sheree. But she came on my show and talked about her business, which wasn't related to locums. But then after we were done doing the interview about the little product that she sells, we started talking just off the mic about how she was doing locums and how it was the best thing she could have ever done for her career. And I said, hold on. We need to record this because there was so much stuff she was just telling me. And I was like, we need to share this information. So we just started the mic back up and recorded a whole nother episode right after that about her telling me about how she got into locums. And so frequently when I have guests on my show, I am listening to them thinking, oh my gosh, I want to be a marijuana doctor specialist. I want to do this because my guests are telling me all these, these interesting things that they're doing. At the end of the day, I can't do all those things that people are doing. That's their thing. But in my head, I'm like, I could do that. That sounds so cool. I want to do that. But ultimately, she was the one that I actually thought I really could do this after I listened to what she was talking about. So anyway, it took a little bit more research, and you and Renee actually helped me out a lot. So I appreciate your help. You guys are so smart about the locum stuff. But I looked into it all and decided that it could actually work for me.
And how's it been since? Because, a lot of people think, as soon as you finish, as soon as you're done, it's going to be, talk to us about like the great things that have been happening or, the not so great things.
Yeah.
Let's get real. We keep it 100% on the docs outside the box. So
Right. And so I quit my job with the expectation of doing so many weeks of locums a year that would kind of basically help me break even with my old salary. That would make it worthwhile that I quit my old job. And so I didn't put in my resignation until I had something lined up with locums and had something, definitely the ball was rolling to take a specific position in a specific place. And that ultimately fell through after 1 month of working there. That's the reality of locums, is that these jobs are not permanent. You need to not be so concerned about job security when you're a locums doctor. You need to make sure you have a good emergency savings. You need to make sure that you're ready for not having work. So that was one of the things I knew was a possibility. And in fact, the recruiter that I was working with said, there may be times where you don't have work. Is that okay? Because I think she probably felt a little personal responsibility that I was literally quitting a full-time set position for something that potentially could, not work out. But ultimately, so it fell through, and I had it in my head that it was possible that I might not have work all the time. So thankfully, with my husband's job situation, everything, we have financial security despite me not working all the time. So I think that's what, is part of the reality of locums. It's not so glamorous in that there are times where you may not have some work for a couple weeks, and you have to hustle to try to find the jobs too.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Understanding how to run a business in medicine will put you at a unique advantage in the future. Whether it's leading a hospital, practice, or starting a new venture, the Physician CEO program will put you in focus from day one. Physician CEO is an accelerated business immersion program developed by MBA faculty from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. The Physician CEO program provides an intensive MBA-style education made up of modules, with each module covering topics from leadership to entrepreneurial ventures. Because of their individualized structure, each participant leaves the program with their 1, 3, and even 5-year business plan, all designed to function in the real world. If you're a physician who is looking to start your own venture, lead your practice or department, or even start planning for succession out of medicine, then you can't afford to miss this opportunity. Class is filling up. Learn more at www.physician-ceo.com/DOTB. The one thing I got from you when we had our first conversation, and I'm definitely hearing it right now, there sounds like there was a hump that you had to get over to go from being either starting your podcast or from deciding to be an independent contractor. And there's still maybe some insecurities right now because you may not have a job for some time. Like, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's talk about fear. Let's talk about insecurity. Let's talk about procrastination because, you know, a lot of things that we talk about with being outside the box, you get it from your guests and so forth, is you have to have that ability to kind of get your mindset right and get past that. So how does Dr. Carrie Reynolds, the host of Hippocratic Hustle, how have you been able to get past fear and all those other things that can hold you back?
Wow, you really have to give yourself pep talks sometimes. I definitely, especially like as an example, before doing those solo episodes, you really have to give yourself a pep talk about how your insecurities are probably blown out of proportion a little bit, that people want to hear what you have to say, that people might actually enjoy watching some Instagram, videos, things like that. You really have to give yourself a pep talk and talk down those fears and insecurities that our brain definitely blows out of proportion. So I'd say that's huge. It's huge to put yourself out there. It's huge to take the risks.
And I think definitely surrounding yourself with people who are successful, right? Like maybe they're not around you immediately, but I think talking to them through the podcast and interviewing them and being able to see, wow, like I didn't know that this possibility exists. At least that's from my standpoint.
Yeah.
That's been able to push me. And I'm sure you've experienced that also.
Well, I definitely have grown. I mean, overall, over the past couple of years, I mean, I only graduated from fellowship about 3 years ago. And this is one thing about medicine that bugs me to no end is that we are beaten down throughout all the stages of our training. And we're always taught that we're the lowest on the totem pole. I mean, it's like, even when you're a graduating fellow, you're still going to be a, junior attending, and even when you've been working for 5 years, there's still somebody who's been working for 10 years. I don't know. There's always just some sort of insecurity with people who are a little bit higher up than you. And so I've always felt that insecurity. But since being on some Facebook groups and meeting people and talking to people, it's like, oh my gosh, no, we are all the same.
Right.
It's, we are all at the same level. I mean, even if someone's been practicing for a few years longer than me, they are still having the same problems that I had, even though I haven't been practicing that long, or someone who's making a product is going through the same angst that I'm going through making this podcast. So we have so many more similarities than we have differences as far as that's concerned. So that's really helped me have a little bit more self-esteem, I guess, as far as making something like a podcast.
Well, my advice is to keep doing what you're doing. It's going to come, and I feel the same way too. Like you start to get nervous. That's one of the things about being an independent contractor is you have to look at yourself like a business, right? And there are going to be great times and hopefully there's more of that than, the bottom times. But, for me, I look at myself as a business and I sometimes have to kind of make sure that I'm prepared for some of the slow times. And I think that may be happening in the near future, but that's okay. Mentally, I just feel like if I had to go back, I'd have to go back. But mentally, I'm in a place that I'm just like, I control my schedule. I control how much I get paid. I control this. I control that. It really is like a very empowering feeling. And I'm sure you're going through that right now.
Oh my gosh.
And the same thing happened to me with my podcast. Like for us to have this type of conversation, for me, like 4 years ago or 2 years ago, it would have been really difficult.
Interesting. Yeah. First of all, I was a huge fan of yours. So when I met you, I was like fangirling. So
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate
it. It's true. It's like, I was listening to you. I was like, oh my gosh, he does such a good job with his podcast.
So let's talk about some of your guests in the past. I'm not going to put you on a spot and I'm not going to say who's your favorite guest, right? But I want to know, like, have you ever had like a really difficult guest? And if you had, or if you have, were you able to kind of get through it? Because there's some people right now who are wanting to start a podcast, who are, in a situation where we were 2 years ago. And that's one thing that they're having a hard time getting past. Like, how do I be assertive with a guest? And can you give some advice on that?
Well, gosh, definitely. Sometimes people can go on long tangents of things in your head. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to pull them back to our topic because we're kind of going on a tangent. That's probably the hardest thing, is trying to find polite ways that will help guide the conversation back without interrupting or cutting people off or making it too blunt of a transition. Because I've definitely listened to some podcasts where you can tell that the guest is kind of going off and people want to bring them back, but they'll just like literally cut them off and change the subject. I don't like that sort of thing. I think it's kind of hard to listen to. So definitely I'm working on my skills of keeping people focused on the topic where I think it should go as far as the interest of the audience.
Do you ever have to like interrupt, or you maybe have to ask like a question, interrupt, and then kind of put your question and kind of put them in a different direction or anything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever stopped an interview maybe? Because I've actually had to stop an interview with someone because I was like, this is crazy. This is just not what I'm looking for.
I don't think we've run off the rails that bad. Probably maybe I should have in some cases, but no.
Yeah, it was episode. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah, exactly. No, unfortunately I've had to cut an episode short because we had huge technical difficulties. So yeah, that's always the bane of any podcaster's day.
So we're getting towards the end of the episode. I'm going to ask you some fast fire questions.
Okay.
Before we go into the fast fire questions, let's talk about quickly the topic that you cover. Like, you focus on personal finance for women physicians. Obviously, the main focus is highlighting the entrepreneurial spirit of women physicians, which I think is amazing, right? You got to be a champion for that. Let's talk. Like, why is women physicians personal finances? Why is it so different than, what a man would go through? I want you to talk about what they should expect from your show and all of that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do have a recurring guest. Bonnie MD is my recurring guest. And if anybody knows her, yes. And if anybody knows her blog, which is MissBonnieMD.com, she is a personal finance specialist for women physicians. And so she comes on and we try to really break things down in a way that people can understand easily. I think there's a lot of personal finance podcasts that are out there, not just physician ones, but also just general ones that you kind of feel talked down to. I mean, I was a big fan of Dave Ramsey, and he just like yells at people, and I think that's not nice. So,
yeah.
So I really wanted a podcast in those segments to be very educational, very real, very easy to understand, so that there's no dumb question, that we can kind of break it down and make it fun and make it, educational and fun all at the same time.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's do some fast fire questions. I'm going to ask you some quick questions. You tell me just what comes off the top of your dome piece. You ready? You game?
Okay.
All right. So let's parse this interview down to the most important thing. What is the one thing that you want the listeners to get from this podcast?
I want listeners to know that they are not stuck. You are not stuck in your position that you're in. You're not stuck with your hobbies. You're not stuck with what you do. You're not stuck in your finances. There are things that you can do that can change your life. And sometimes we just need to take some risks and think outside the box. Sorry, had to.
Hell yes, Dr. Carrie. Hell yeah.
It's like such the right term for all this stuff.
I love it. I love it. All right. So knowing what you know now, right? Let's say you can go back in time and talk to yourself as a pre-med or even as a medical student. What kind of advice would you have given yourself?
Oh my gosh, that I am worthy, that I am better than I think, that I have value and worth. Because, oh my gosh, just when you think back to medical school, how little did you feel? How small did you feel? How worthless did you feel when you were rounding with the residents? And it's so sad. I just am trying to beat that feeling out of me because I think it was put in there and it became ingrained a little bit in my own personality, but I'm trying to beat it out. So I'm hoping that this will also help other women to get that out of their system too.
Hell yes, Dr. Carrie. Hell yes. Hell yes. I love it. I love it. Let's move on. This is great. Your answer is great. So Dr. Carrie, what is a personal habit? What is something that you do on the regular that has helped you become more successful or even just be a doc outside the box?
I think what's helped me the most is stopping to think. And one of the ways I have learned to do that is by using an app called Headspace. So,
Headspace.
Yeah, have you heard of it? No?
Yeah, I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. So it's an app that's on your phone. I hope it's on Android for uni, but
You don't have to rub it in.
No, it's on my iPhone. But basically, it's guided meditation, and it really helps you really work on focus and just take a time out to think. Part of the problem is that, I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, sometimes I reach for my phone and I start looking at my email or I start looking at Facebook. And to a certain extent, it's like that's all business related, right? I mean, we do a lot of our business online and all that stuff. So I feel like I'm being productive, but that is the worst way to start my day. So I've tried to, and I'm saying this because I need to keep trying because it's very hard to break old habits, but I put my phone in the bathroom so that it's not there right next to me to charge overnight. So yeah, I moved my charger into the bathroom. And Thankfully I'm not on call or anything, so no one really needs to get a hold of me. So
that's audacious.
Yeah, I know, right? It's a bold move.
Wow. Like I'm just thinking, I'm like, can I do that? Damn.
It's bold. Yeah. Yeah. So that way I have to physically get up to get my phone. And there's a new feature on the iOS that actually limits your use. So you can set limits as far as what time you want to stop using your apps and when you want to start, what's allowed and what's not allowed and things like that. Well, it's really easy to override that, unfortunately, but at least it's a reminder. And if I'm working to consciously work on this, then all the reminders help. So what I try to do is I try to get up and I have my meditation time. And really those guided meditations through Headspace only take about 10 minutes. But I'm also trying to journal. You know, those episodes that I made with my locums, the solo episodes, were all made on a plane. When I was sitting on a plane where I didn't have Wi-Fi, I didn't purchase Wi-Fi, I didn't have any distractions. I was traveling by myself, so I didn't have my daughter. And I just took my journal out and just wrote. And it's like stream of consciousness writing. And that really, honestly, I think that's what we all need to do no matter what. It's like, even if you're not going to use anything that you're writing for anything, it just helps you process and get that stuff out.
I love it.
Mindfulness. Yeah, I guess that's what it is. And I mean, a lot of people, guided meditation or prayer or anything that helps you just slow down and stop and let your brain work, because we're always bringing stuff in, you know, it's like the phone and the computers, it's like pushing all this crap into our heads and we don't have time to really get it out. And
you know, I really appreciate your answer let me tell you why, because I think I've had other guests talk about meditation. I've talked to other guests about mindfulness, but you know, nobody's ever really said something as simple as moving the phone out of the bedroom. Right. Because that's a big deal though, right? Because I do that. I wake up and I'm looking at my texts or I'm looking at what I have to do for the rest of the day. And like you said, like there's no like you time, right? And right. I love everything that you mentioned, but that is something that's really going to stick with me. Like maybe I should do that. So yeah, I do appreciate you doing that.
Really great.
I love it. I love it. Well, how about this, Dr. Carrie? I want you to name a famous figure or someone that you admire that you would love to trade places with just for 24 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. I was just thinking, I've been listening to my Audible books, trying to catch up. And there's 2 books that I've been listening to recently. So Michelle Obama's Becoming.
Damn, you're like the 4th guest that I've had that's fire, right?
God, I love Michelle Obama. Wow. Oh, man. I just want to be her friend. I don't want to be her. I want to be her friend, I guess. That's good enough. And then I listened to The Princess Diaries, which was Carrie Fisher's memoir. And now I don't want to be Carrie Fisher because she lived through a lot of crap, but yeah, she did. Man, is she sassy. Yeah. I want her sass and her vigor. And, you know, she was just an amazing sassy lady who also came from ideas of feeling insecure and growing into her sassiness. So I guess that's kind of how I feel right now.
I love it. I love it. So Dr. Carrie, what's one life hack or piece of technology that you use that makes your life easier?
I use Evernote to help me save a lot of my documents. And especially with credentialing, when you're credentialing with a million different places, I have all of my documents that I might need to ever share with people. So I have my CV, I have my BLS card, I have, you know, all sorts of little things like that I've used the app Scannable, which is its sister program. Anyway, you use your phone to scan in documents and then it saves it into Evernote. And then in Evernote, you can just send it off. And so I've had so many credentialers and people I've been working with who are like, wow, you responded really fast. And it's like, well, you asked for proof of this license. I have it here in my Evernote and I can just send it. So I love it. Anyway.
I love it. I hope everybody takes note of that. Evernote is the bomb. You have a free version or paid version? Be honest.
I actually pay. I pay. I'm a power user. I pay.
I love it. I love it. So Dr. Carrie Reynolds, this has been fun. And, you know, before we go though, I want to ask you one last question. It's a question that I ask to all of my guests. I want you to complete this. It says, Dr. Carrie Reynolds, I'm not just a doc. I'm a
podcaster and influencer.
Boom. I love it. I love how you embrace it. I love how you are taking charge of that. And Dr. Carrie Reynolds, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You know, I really have to say, and I really want to acknowledge you for, you know, really focusing on a topic that really doesn't get a lot of light. And I think that there has to be a place where, you know, women physicians who are concerned about their personal finance have a place to kind of listen, because not everybody's voice resonates, right? A male voice may not resonate with everybody and vice versa. So I just appreciate the space that you've created. I appreciate your podcast. I appreciate what you and Dr. Bonnie are doing. You're doing great work. You're influencing a lot of people and you're owning it. So I just want to acknowledge you for what you're doing. And I just say, keep up the great work.
Thanks, Nee.